Testing crisis sites closed early across Sydney as nearly 500 more people were incorrectly cleared of COVID-19. Good evening, I'm Dan Borscher. This is ABC News. Queensland resists pressure to relax entry rules for interstate travellers despite being blamed for overwhelming the New South Wales health system.
It's time that the PCR tests for tourism testing were dropped, preferably today, Premier.
Two children reunited with their parents after spending the night lost in bushland in the state's central west. And Australia finishes off its old enemy as a local hero cements his place in Ashes history. The COVID-19 testing system in New South Wales has been stretched well beyond capacity. Most sites closed early across Sydney today, where thousands of people turned away after queuing for hours. Despite the shutdowns, the headaches continue for health staff. Almost 500 people who were incorrectly cleared of having the virus have now been told they are infected.
This is what a system struggling to cope looks like. Queues as far as the eye can see before testing clinics had even opened. Cars were banked up in West Pennant Hills since the break of dawn.
I got here at 10 to 5.
I left house at 5, so I got here at 5:30.
We tried yesterday and we waited about 8 hours, so we had to come again today.
In Maroubra, the line for testing looked like peak hour traffic. Bondi turned into a car park, while vehicles snaked through Mascot for hours.
The government's requiring us to get tested, so they should be supporting us, but they're not.
Personally, I think the government failed. I think they should secure much more staff for this period.
It's a joke, absolute joke.
In Ultimo, it was single file as the queue wrapped around the city, while vehicles lined the Princes Highway in Kogarah for kilometres. The chaos was only heightened by the fact many clinics were operating on public holiday hours, closing at midday and turning thousands of people away.
This one's closed, you can't get in.
Some ignored staff and tried to jump the queue.
You can't get in, sir! Sir, move!
Clinics across Sydney all faced the same problem. Staff overwhelmed by the number of people out to get tested.
There are people who have been at the front line doing pathology, literally in some cases. Some of these laboratories work through the night and they're exhausted.
It was another day of more than 6,000 new cases and there was one death. 557 people are in hospital, 60 of those are in intensive care. Testing queues aren't the only problem. Almost 500 people whose tests were sent here to St Vincent's Hospital were incorrectly told they didn't have COVID, when in fact they did. Everyone has since been notified, but it means that hundreds of people have unknowingly spent time in the community whilst infectious.
There was an error, a human error, and unfortunately when people are under pressure, human errors become more frequent.
The government plans to provide free rapid antigen tests to the public, but it's still weeks away.
We've put an order in already for 20 million rapid antigen tests. My expectation is that they will be available by the end of January.
As the state scrambles to find new ways of coping with this ever-evolving pandemic. Cayman Gok, ABC News, Sydney.
And Cayman Gok joins me from the Sydney Cricket Ground. Cayman, there were fears the next Ashes test would not go ahead, but it now looks like it will.
Well, Dan, both the Premier and Health Minister have shut down any speculation that Sydney won't hold the fourth test. The Ashes has been heavily impacted by the pandemic. The Perth test has been moved to Hobart due to WA's hard border restrictions. Australian captain Pat Cummins had to withdraw from the Adelaide test at the last minute due to a COVID scare. And just yesterday, play was delayed at the MCG due to 4 people in the England camp testing positive with the virus. So there was concern that with the high case numbers in New South Wales at the moment that the test could be held elsewhere, but the state government has reassured the public that is nonsense and the pink test at the SCG is not at risk. Dan?
Cayman Gok reporting. Queensland is resisting calls to scrap the entry requirements for interstate travellers, despite being publicly blamed for overwhelming the New South Wales health system. Premier Dominic Perrottet wants the rule scrapped immediately, but the Sunshine State won't consider doing so until the new year.
Another day of COVID chaos.
Keep moving!
But the Premier insists it's going to plan.
Our plan is working. I sat in press conferences as we opened up, press conference after press conference said cases are going to increase.
The Health Minister has a different take.
The staff are exhausted. There just aren't the capacity anymore to have additional staff walking down those lines and asking the questions that need to be asked, particularly when some of those queues are 3 and 4 kilometres long.
Come on, guys.
Move!
Both blamed the lines and delays on the Sunshine State and its requirement for travellers to get a negative COVID test in the 72 hours before they arrive.
So I'm, just as many people are in New South Wales, exhausted and had it with some of the actions that have been taken by the Queensland Premier.
But if we can move that PCR requirement to a rapid antigen test requirement, that will significantly alleviate some of the pressure on the testing over summer.
Today, Queensland stood firm there won't be any changes to entry tests before the new year.
That we are currently looking at whether we can move to the rapid antigen tests from the 1st of January. But we've also got to make sure there's adequate supply.
London resident Julie Purcell was heading home to Queensland for Christmas, but she's stuck in New South Wales because her results didn't come back in time. She's now paid for a private test and hopes it will meet the deadline.
I travel quite a bit in Europe and you have to do testing quite frequently there, but it's these wait times which I've never experienced, and being hit with pre-72-hour tests that take 100 hours, it's definitely something that's not expected. I definitely didn't expect that.
The opposition says political blame shifting won't fix the testing chaos.
It's absolutely critical that the name-calling stop and the leadership starts.
Dominic Perrottet has built his reputation as the Freedom Premier, championing a different approach to living with COVID. But the initial excitement of avoiding more lockdowns is turning to frustration, with thousands spending hours in testing queues or stuck at home isolating over the holidays. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Sydney.
Australian research appears to be backing up studies that found Omicron causes less severe illness than Delta. As the number of cases grows quickly, the hospitalisation data shows each infected person has a much smaller chance of being admitted than earlier in the year. Here's data analyst Casey Briggs.
Hospitalisations are climbing in a couple of states, SA for one, but fastest in New South Wales, which has 557 people now in hospital, and that's a number that's nearly doubled in just 1 week. Intensive care admissions are not growing as quickly, at least not for now, and remember, most of the people in ICU are people who have Delta, not Omicron. So if we look at the individual outcomes for each infected person, things do actually look better for each patient now that we're dealing with Omicron and most of us are vaccinated. This chart shows you the number of people in hospital as a share of all of the cases in the state across the past fortnight. So it's a proxy for active cases that lets us make comparisons between states. And in New South Wales, your likelihood of ending up in hospital if you're infected has been steadily dropping since that late October Delta peak through to where we are right now. In Victoria, that percentage is a little bit higher, and that's a state that does seem to have more Delta still than Omicron, at least for now, and that might start to change, especially now we've seen a big spike in case numbers today. South Australia is a state that never had a Delta outbreak earlier in the year. 4/5 of its cases at the moment are Omicron, and the hospitalisation rate there looks to be even a little bit lower than New South Wales, at least for the time being. So the data seems to be backing up the international experience of a less severe illness for each individual that's infected. But of course, there's a lot of virus circulating, and that's one of the reasons there are concerns for hospital capacity. When you look on a per capita basis, New South Wales is currently recording more than 700 cases a day per million people in the population. South Australia has the second highest virus prevalence in the country at the moment, and then there's Victoria and the ACT, which both have a pretty similar amount of virus circulating in this community when you account for the differences in population.
There are warnings in Europe that New Year festivities could increase the spread of COVID-19 as the Omicron variant surges. Countries like France and Germany have tightened restrictions, but New Year's Eve celebrations are going ahead. And in the UK, the government is holding firm against calls for new rules. Here's Europe correspondent Isabella Higgins.
London stores and pubs might still be open, but the streets are quiet. With cases climbing, many are avoiding crowds.
It is growing fast. We think some 90% of cases now across England are this new Omicron variant.
Over the Christmas weekend, daily cases in England soared over 100,000 and more than 8,000 people are in hospital, the highest level since March, but still well below last year's peak. The UK government maintains no further measures are needed.
We look at the data on a daily basis. That hasn't changed over the Christmas period, but there will be no further measures before the new year.
Conservative MPs have threatened a revolt if more restrictions are introduced. It leaves England out of step with Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, which have rolled out capacity limits in bars and restaurants and shut nightclubs and other big venues.
People over here don't understand it. They read it and they say that's different from what we've got in Scotland.
Even before the latest restrictions were introduced, each nation had work-from-home orders, were requiring COVID passports in some venues and mandated mask wearing in certain settings.
It's all pretty straightforward and sensible. We wear masks as a matter of course.
Across the Channel, France is also dealing with record case numbers, recently exceeding 100,000 daily infections for the first time. Like the UK, it's keeping venues open, but it's introduced restrictions on the number of people who can gather.
This won't stop us from living normally. The vaccination drive is in full speed, and for now, we don't feel this is as serious as what we experienced in 2020.
With such different rules in place, New Year's Eve will look very different across Europe. Isabella Higgins, ABC News, London.
Health authorities in the United States have halved the isolation period for COVID-positive people to 5 days, as long as they're not showing symptoms. The Centre for Disease Control and Prevention says there's growing evidence people are most infectious in the 2 days before and 3 days after symptoms develop. Cases in the US have risen more than 80% over the past 2 weeks to more than 200,000 a day. That's placing significant strain on workers in hospitals and industries like air travel.
With the rising cases, we still have tens of millions of unvaccinated people, and we're seeing hospitalizations rise.
The White House is mobilising an additional 1,000 military doctors and nurses to help staff hospitals. Australia has retained the Ashes and won the series on the back of a brilliant bowling display from debutant Scott Boland in the third test at the MCG. Boland finished with the extraordinary figure of 6 for 7 as England was dismissed for only 68 to suffer a humiliating defeat.
Only 80 minutes into day 3 and it was all over. The quick kill stunned cricket experts.
Australia have won by an innings and 14 runs. How is that possible? It's not possible.
It's what, dreams are made of, the way we've played.
It was a nightmare for England captain Joe Root.
I'm absolutely gutted. Bitterly disappointed.
Australia's hero was Scott Boland, a 32-year-old debutant who thought Test cricket had passed him by.
I just try to stick to what I've done the last 5, 6, 7 years and in Shield cricket, and that's what got me here to this point. I was just hoping it was going to be good enough.
It was well beyond good enough as the humble Victorian casually took wickets in front of a delirious MCG crowd.
I've never played in front of a crowd that's been so supportive of me like that.
We're not overly surprised. We knew he was going to do a great job for us on the MCG. Probably surprised that he took 6 for 7.
The second Indigenous Australian male to play Test cricket won the Johnny Muller Medal, the Player of the Match award named after the leader of the 1868 Aboriginal tour of the UK.
Hopefully that can be a sort of like a springboard for young Aboriginals to get involved in the game of cricket.
Questions are being asked about Root's future as captain, with his team winning only one of its past 12 tests.
They've got some big problems. It's been embarrassing.
We need to put some pride back into the badge and make sure we come away from this tour with something.
Boland's belated emergence means Australia has an embarrassment of bowling riches to choose from for the fourth test in Sydney.
As captain, I can firmly say I'm not a selector because good luck to him.
England might need a little luck and a lot of grit to stop an Australian team that's eyeing off a 5-0 clean sweep. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
2 children have been reunited with their parents after spending a night missing in dense bushland in central western New South Wales. The siblings failed to return from a bushwalk near Mudgee yesterday afternoon, sparking a massive search that ended around lunchtime.
After 22 hours in remote bushland came the news everyone had been hoping for. 14-year-old Eli Jones and his 12-year-old sister Hannah were spotted waving at a rescue helicopter at about midday as it scoured the rugged terrain.
It's a sensational feeling, obviously for all the, not only the family and friends of the children, but it's also fantastic for all the people, the emergency services, the local community and also the community from Sydney, from where the children are from.
The alarm was raised the children failed to return from a bushwalk yesterday afternoon. Emergency services were joined by locals on foot and horseback. Police have praised the children's resilience for surviving in rugged bushland in cool overnight temperatures.
Every minute that they're out there is another minute that they could be in danger, so it's just fantastic that they've been located when they have.
Police say there were tears of happiness when the children were reunited with their family. They can now return home to Sydney after what was supposed to be a relaxing Christmas holiday. The family has issued a statement expressing gratitude.
The family would like to give our deepest thanks to emergency services and volunteers for assisting in the safe recovery of our children. A special thank you to communities from both Mudgee and Sydney.
The children's parents have asked for privacy while they all recover from the ordeal. Xanthi Gregory, ABC News, Cairns Flat.
A man is in hospital after an explosion at a kebab shop in Canberra last night. CCTV footage shows the blast followed by a shower of debris at the store in the city's north around 7:30 last night. Emergency services attended and the owner of the shop was taken to hospital. The grocer next door says he helped the owner to safety.
When I ran and came, he had his arms and the hands, they were burned. He had one hand on his tummy because it was bleeding from the tummy, but he was in the good senses.
Investigators say they're yet to determine the cause of the explosion and are urging witnesses to come forward. Women in Afghanistan have protested against restrictions that are keeping them from working, going to school and participating in politics. Chanting education, work and freedom leads to development, they called on the country's new Taliban leadership to respect women's rights. Since taking power in August, the Taliban has imposed restrictions on women and girls despite promising to protect them. On Sunday, Taliban authorities issued a directive that women should not travel long distances unless they are with a close male relative. More than 5,000 cranes have died after bird flu broke out at a nature reserve in Israel. Authorities say the outbreak is the deadliest wildlife disaster in the country's history. Workers have been removing the carcasses to prevent further spread of the disease. Hundreds of thousands of chickens in the area have been killed as a precaution. People forced to cancel their Queensland holidays are struggling to find alternative accommodation in New South Wales, with some regional areas experiencing a bumper season. The outback is proving a popular destination among Sydney-siders, despite recent floods and heightened concerns about the Omicron variant.
Taronga Western Plains Zoo at Dubbo has long been one of the biggest tourism drawcards in regional New South Wales. These holidays, accommodation here is booked out. It seems lingering doubts about border closures have encouraged many people to holiday within their own state.
Because it is safe, they know that they can go ahead with their travel, and they know that they will not have issues with border closures preventing them from going on their holiday.
And even though recent flooding has been widespread, it won't be a problem for visitors to the zoo.
Fortunately, the only thing that the rain did for us here in Dubbo was really green up the paddocks and make everything look fantastic.
This family made the journey inland from Sydney after deciding against a trip to Tasmania for their daughter's birthday.
So the kids are not vaccinated. I feel very unsafe to take them interstate, obviously going in a plane, and it's safer to come regional.
But not everyone is as reluctant to cross borders. In the state's northwest, Bourke is reaping the benefits of people driving to Queensland for holidays.
And every story's the same. We haven't been able to see our son or our family for 6 months.
Summer isn't usually a peak tourism season for Bourke. It's just too hot. But with the Darling Barker experiencing high flows, many people are taking the rare opportunity to see the region while it is lush, green, and the river is high. While floodwaters may present a few extra challenges for people heading west this summer, locals say the rare sights are worth it.
With a big river, there comes a few extra dangers, but just take care, plan ahead and take in all the beauty.
Plenty to see in your own backyard. Robin Heron, ABC News, Dubbo.
A tactical battle is unfolding in the Sydney-Hobart yacht race as the two frontrunners inch closer to the finish line. Blackjack continues to lead from Law Connect on line honours. Chris Rowbottom reports.
From harrowing conditions on day one to a brighter outlook on day two, those lucky enough to be still standing enjoying far calmer waters as the race continues for the Sydney-Hobart fleet. But for those knocked out, it was an early return to port. The crew of Patriot pulling into Eden on the New South Wales coast with rudder trouble.
The risk is too high if the rudder, that bearing fails or our securing mechanism fails, it comes out and it can punch a hole in the bottom of the boat. So it could be quite catastrophic.
Disappointment for the crew of Maverick too, also retiring with a broken rudder.
I'm gutted, I really am, and it's going to take me a long time to get over this.
Some damage more serious than others. 2018 handicap winner Alive pulled out with a cracked hull. The three Supermaxis escaped the carnage and are now in a tactical battle off Tasmania's east coast. Blackjack leads from Law Connect and Scallywag, but is without its owner for the ride south. Peter Harburg opting to meet the boat in Hobart rather than sail, a decision that could prove the difference.
We figured that we'd need to have as little weight on it as possible coming up the Derwent if it got light, because then we could possibly chase them down and win the race.
Line Honours is still too close to call. A three-way battle up the River Derwent, a distinct possibility.
They could be match racing up the Derwent after 2 solid days of racing. It could be like the race starts all over again in Storm Bay.
Tricky conditions are expected to result in a slow crawl to Hobart tonight. Chris Rowbottom, ABC News.
And Chris Rowbottom joins us now from the Hobart waterfront. Chris, what's your best guess? When will we see the first yacht cross the finish line?
Dan, I can't give you a precise time, unfortunately, but I can give you an educated estimate. We're expecting a Line Honours winner to be crowned at around 2 to 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, so early hours of tomorrow morning, very likely under the cover of darkness. That will depend, of course, on what happens with the variable wind conditions as they come down the east coast, and then what happens once they hit the mouth of the river, and then the River Derwent itself, where we know the wind can die off and the race can slow up dramatically. So it is Blackjack still leading from Law Connect and Scallywag, who are engaged in a little bit of a battle on their own. for second and third. The next 6 or 7 hours are crucial to determine what happens in the race as they crawl down the east coast and then into the Derwent. But a early hours of the morning finish tomorrow under the cover of darkness for this year's race is expected.
Well, sounds like an early start for you. Chris Rowbottom reporting from Hobart. You might carry a keep cup to reduce waste or install solar panels to avoid fossil fuels. But what about investing your money for the greater good? Australians are piling into what's known as ethical or responsible investing, with estimates it's an industry worth almost $3 billion.
Prompted by growing concerns about climate change, Nicole Haddo got into what's known as ethical investing.
And I thought, what kind of world are we living in? And I started to think about what I could do with my money to make a difference.
Ethical, responsible or sustainable investing simply means thinking about people, society and the environment when you make decisions about where to put your money.
Things like fossil fuels or human rights abuses or animal cruelty, we're seeing a huge increase in consumers really wanting to exclude those from their retirement savings funds or from their investment portfolios.
Financial advisors also recommend asking your bank what they invest in, and if you don't like it, consider switching.
Well, I think there's actually quite a lot of investment risk in investing in oil, gas and coal because they can be stranded assets in the future.
Ethical investing is not just about feeling good. Responsibly invested share funds have an average one-year return of 1.7% and 8.1% over a decade. That's on par with the one-year returns of the ASX 300 index and beats returns of 7.8% over 10 years. For people who invest in a social enterprise like Street, big returns are not as important.
Impact investing is essentially using your money for good, so your investment money to do social and environmental change. And the types of ways that we've used impact investment is to build a site like this, for example.
Investing with a clear conscience. Rihanna Whitson, ABC News.
To the weather now, and g'day, Graham. Is any of that heat in Perth headed our way?
Yeah, look, some of it is, Dan, although not the extremity that we've experienced over in Perth. A record run of 4 days. So temperatures there above 40 degrees over that 4-day period. We will see that heat impact the western and southern parts of New South Wales, particularly from Friday to Sunday, but it'll still hang around even as we're moving towards Monday and Tuesday due to a very slow weather pattern over this period. Now, in Sydney, we saw on and off showers through the day, generally about the eastern third, with a band of falls of 10 to 20 millimetres between Terry Hills and Middle Harbour. The showers also extended along the coastal ranges anywhere north of Sydney, but most of the falls were below 10 millimetres. But we did see some isolated showers and thunderstorms over the northern and central inland. 12 millimetres fell at Moree and 11 millimetres at Barona Downs. Now, the trough over the inland and a moist onshore wind flow have been what's combining to trigger the cloud and the showers and the thunderstorms, but that pattern continues to weaken as the inland trough continues to move further west. And then a high pressure system builds over the Tasman Sea and the coast will start to stabilise. The winds start to tend more northwest over the inland. That's what's going to help to draw that hot air down on the eastern side of this trough sitting through the southeast. Now, after equalling the 4-day record in Perth, there's still one more hot day to go there. And the tropical low will bring severe weather conditions across much of northern Queensland. So for us, just patchy and light showers, they'll remain a possibility, but they'll be confined to the coast and nearby ranges anywhere north of about Wollongong. So in the northeast, a partly cloudy day, just an isolated and light shower possible for the Hunter and Tablelands, but they will tend more likely and more widespread elsewhere. And the stronger of the winds on Byron waters are expected to ease as we move through the evening. It'll be a partly cloudy day about the Blue Mountains and the northern Illawarra, just an isolated and light shower possible, but it should remain mostly dry and sunny through the remainder. Mostly light winds on the waters, although they will freshen later in the day anywhere south of about Ulladulla. We've also got a mostly sunny, dry and warm to very warm day over the inland. Moderate easterly winds, although they are tending a little bit fresh at times across the more northern districts. On Sydney waters, we've got light winds on the closed waters and they'll be a little bit fresher but ease later on the coastal waters. We got lows of 12 to 17 and tops of 22 to 25. Another partly cloudy day, just the chance of an isolated and generally light shower possible. Now, we do expect to see that high really kicking in on Thursday, so dry and sunny conditions. We can see some of that heat pushing into the western suburbs, but with that onshore wind float, just that little bit milder, but still remaining mostly dry along the coast, Dan.
Thanks, Graham. That's all from the ABC News team tonight. I'm Dan Borscher. Thanks for your company. Stay safe and have a great evening.